Respect. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee. I'm John Quincy, the chair, and I'm joined by Council Members Bender, Palomisano, Yang. Council Vice President Glidden is unable to join us today as she is on attending a funeral, so we wish her the best in that. And Council Member Andrew Johnson is at the state capitol working on the city's behalf today. But we are a quorum of the committee and can begin here. I think we have 24 items on our agenda today. Let me just quickly run through the consent agenda and see if there's any questions from council members. If you'd like to pull off anything for further discussion. The first two items are for the Finance and Property Services Department. It's an acquisition of two properties on East Side Storage and Maintenance Facility, as well as a contract amendment with United States Mechanical. That's for the the Fire Department Washer Extractor Improvement Project. Human Resources Department brings forward a contract with Mind Gym for individualized liability limits. Information Technology Department has a number of items, including a contract amendment with Bezatech, a contract with Digital Health Department. We also have a contract amendment with Iceberg Technology for IT staff augmentation services, contract amendments with the pool of suppliers for IT professional services, maintenance, and support contracts, memorandum of understanding with the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension and the Minneapolis Police Department for National Database Exchange. We have a contract amendment number 9 for the TriTech software systems. That's the First Watch Solutions, Inc. and Decan for International for the CAD 911 support system and program. We also have a request for proposal for consulting services for a citywide website management project. The Executive Committee brings forward the collective bargaining agreements with the Police Officers Federation, and that's 2015 through 2016, as well as 2017 and 2019. And we also have from the Community Development and Regulatory Services Committee grant acceptance for Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development and Metropolitan Council's Tax-Based Revitalization Account and Hennepin County's Environmental Response Fund for the fall 2016 Brownfield Grant Round. Health, Environment, and Community Engagement Committee brings forward a grant acceptance from Department of Human Services for tobacco compliance. We also have from the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee a gift acceptance from New York Police Department for payment of travel-related costs, as well as gift acceptance for Minnesota Final Four Host Committee for travel-related costs. Transportation and Public Works Committee brings forward the 2017 Concrete Street Rehabilitation Program, Lakewood Harriet Area Residential Street Resurfacing Project, the agreement with Hennepin County for reconstruction of the Cedar Avenue, Franklin Avenue, Minnehaha Avenue intersections. Also have the agreement with the State of Minnesota's Department of Transportation for Central Avenue and University Avenue traffic signal and ADA projects. I have a contract amendment with Lucy Laney School pedestrian crosswalks project. Comes out of our Safe Routes to School program. We also have a grant acceptance from Hennepin County Transit Oriented Development Program for the 4th Street Southeast reconstruction project. Capital project closeouts and appropriation and revenue adjustments within the city's capital project and enterprise funds. And the final item on our consent agenda is a bid. It's a low bid from Fisher Mining for delivery of fine aggregate. Are there any questions on those 23 items from members? And we have Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to just ask a question with regards to item number 11, and it's much more philosophical than anything.
Sure.
For these collective bargaining agreements, here it's the Police Officers Federation, but, why don't we just negotiate contracts for a couple of years or negotiate backwards and then frontwards when, let's say, we're not thinking about negotiating, let's say, for the next 5 years or so, or 10 years. I mean, but, just hypothetically speaking, why aren't we thinking about doing those sorts of things? And sometimes we're behind, and then sometimes we're trying to, get ahead. But, if we're getting ahead for 1 or 2 years, sometimes what happens is that we just are behind regardless. And so if I can just throw that out there, and if, I don't know, there's staff here that can answer that, that'd be great. If not, I can wait for the answer in my office.
Okay, I'll fine for that. I just wanted to point out this particular agreement, actually ended at the end of 2014. So
Right.
we've been operating without a contract for a
Right.
couple of years now. And so this is doing some retroactive work as well as moving forward. And the tentative agreement that we had before wasn't ratified by the other party. So that's probably the delay in this particular occasion. I don't know if there's a philosophical reason why we'd be taking it 1 or 2 years at a time, but having this in place for the next 2 years is supposedly a big enhancement for this particular project. Is there anybody from the police department or, looks like Mr. Ruff has a comment. Good. And let's deal with the finance department because that's a good idea when we're talking about contracts.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, I think philosophically, if I heard you ask, why don't we do these for a longer period of time, 5 or 10 years, I think much of that is because the increases that are set in these contracts are attempt to tie to inflation. And so if we have a longer term contract, then we'd probably end up being renegotiating them if inflation was higher or lower. And so just on a broader level outside of this contract, I think that's why you tend to see these be somewhat in the 2 to 3 year range, because that's as far as anyone is comfortable predicting. But beyond that, we can certainly bring that back as a question on a broader basis to those who are responsible for negotiating the other contracts that exist within the city, and certainly respond from that perspective.
Councilmember, does that work for you or would you like additional comments?
No,
Mr. Giles? Good.
Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments, questions? Good. Not seeing any, I'd move all 23 items for approval from this committee. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. And those items carry forward. Now it leaves us to the final item on our agenda, which is a presentation. I think this is a receive and file item, if I'm not mistaken. No, we do have a presentation from staff. Obviously, we have City Coordinator, Mr. Cronk. If you'd like to join us for this. This is in response to the staff direction on downtown assets from the budget process. Mr. Cronk, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Quincy, committee members. My name is Spencer Cronk, City Coordinator, and I have a short presentation for you today, which is really in response to a staff direction that was given in the 2016 budget adoption process on downtown assets. So just to review, that staff direction did direct the coordinator's office to look into providing a recommendation around the development of a staff committee, and that's really what we're going to be presenting to you today, a resolution to develop a committee that would look at downtown assets more collectively, holistically, and plan for our financial and operational future regarding them. So I wanted to quickly review just what a downtown asset might look like. We have a few of them in our downtown area. They include the Convention Center, the Commons, PV Plaza, and Target Center. They have a number of things in common, which they are owned by the city. They're in downtown, and they do have an ongoing operational and capital need for the city to invest in their future use, so we can take care of those assets more comprehensively. They are, however, operationalized and managed by a series of different departments across the city. So as you see here, the Convention Center, and Jeff Johnson as the executive director does do oversight for both the Convention Center and our contract with Target Center. Public Works has largely taken over oversight and management of PV Plaza, and through a relationship with both CPED and Public Works on the new Commons Park in downtown East. That said, that's a little bit spread out throughout the entire city. So we thought, how can we really be managing these more effectively and centrally? So through the staff direction, the recommendation is really to take the model governance structure that we already have in place through our FSAM committee, our Facilities, Space, and Asset Management Committee that was developed in 1989. That's been very useful in functioning in creating a overall comprehensive look across our different assets, space assets, public assets that we have across the enterprise. And so to use that to establish a similar committee that would be called the Downtown Public Asset Committee. This would be comprised of representatives from CPED, the Convention Center, Public Works, Finance, and would be chaired by myself as city coordinator. We'd meet monthly. We'd have a finance plan for operating and capital needs each year. We would look at a 5-year forecast, and we'd also have a process that we would follow for other assets as they come on board, like we saw with the Commons Park in the last couple of years. So as our city evolves and changes and grows, we may have other things that we want to incorporate into this downtown asset committee. So the recommendation would really be to have one area responsible for these assets so that they could manage the different contract for operators that we have, so they wouldn't be spread out throughout different departments across the enterprise. For example, we have Green Minneapolis currently managing the Commons, AEG managing the Target Center, and other vendors as appropriate. Currently, Public Works just manages itself for PV Plaza right now. This would be in partnership with a lot of our downtown partners that include the Downtown Council, the DID, BOMA, Meet Minneapolis, the Hennepin Theater Trust, and MFSA. So we would be working in consultation with them, bringing them into this committee as needed, as we would discuss assets that would be impacting them as well. The goals of this committee are really a couple-fold. One, financial, to ensure that we have recommendations that are on these current unfunded capital needs, to determine our sustainable operating costs for these downtown assets, to clarify the need for fund balances, and to make sure that we have a good ROI on this financial investment. They're also operational because it takes money, and we have to make sure that if we're going to take on these assets as a public entity, that we want to make sure that they are sustainable in terms of how long they can be used. We don't want to have a PV Plaza or a Commons Park that's not well maintained, not kept up. And so really thinking through the long-term operational needs for these areas and how we can move through a financial direction that would make that work for the city. So again, financial, operational, and then really thinking about this future focused work around maintaining this high standard over the long term for these assets. Really, the next step is to formalize this committee at the direction of that staff direction from the budget. There's a resolution in front of you that I'm recommending that we move forward to establish the Downtown Public Asset Committee, and then we will report back through the Ways and Means process on just the work that this committee has been putting forward over the year. So very short presentation, but I want to let you know that we have been working closely with the internal departments, CPED, Public Works, both the leadership in those departments and staff to think through what's going to be the best way forward given that staff direction, and then to formalize this Public Asset Committee. Happy to stand for questions. I'm also joined by our CFO if there are other questions financially too.
Good. Excuse me, Mr. Kronk, thank you very much. I appreciate, obviously, moving forward on this particular staff direction, which was part of the budget process. As we said, how are we going to spend the monies and where they're going to come from? And that's really not the point necessarily of this group. They won't have that kind of authority. That'll still be invested within the council as part of the budget process. But this gives it some framework to look at our longer term forecast. When do you expect that might be coming back to this committee with that analysis? I know it's in part of the 18 budget process, but it would be early or at the late part of it?
I would say, Chair Quincy, I would say that we will continue to have internal conversations, and then maybe late May, early June would probably be an appropriate time to come back to this committee.
And you'd be chairing this particular committee, and who else would be representative on that committee?
I think in the resolution it outlines specifically who would be there. So it would be myself as the chair or designee, a director of Public Works, the executive director of CPED, the assistant city coordinator for the convention center, and then the assistant city coordinator for finance, or CFO.
Real good. Thank you very much. Councilmember Bender.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to confirm that these were both sort of like building assets as well as public space assets.
So they would not necessarily, Chair
Yeah,
Quincy, Councilmember Bender, we have a separate, through the FSAM committee, that's really for our publicly owned buildings. So when we're thinking about the new consolidated office building, that's really an FSAM decision. These are more of the public-facing assets. And so we listed the 4 of those that we will be currently working from. And then if there are others that are added to that list, we will be bringing those forward through the committee process.
Right.
Thank you. I really appreciate this approach, and I think it will make it easier for us to make decisions about these as they come forward. So thank you for doing this, and thank you for being proactive on this. Thanks.
Good. I think it does help put some framework on it, looking just not one-off every year, looking at how much we're going to fund this project for and how much we're not, and where we're going to get the revenues from. So that's very exciting. So I appreciate that very much, the structure and the approach. And any other questions on that? This helps codify that, so this will be a good step. So I'd like to move this. Anybody, other comments? Not seeing any? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Not seeing any. That passes. Thank you very much. And that exhausts our agenda for the day, so we are adjourned.